It's for the first time after 37 years that Ladakh has seen an agitation where people have died.
The fact that the Ladakh Hill Council's office was also burnt, right? Which
Yes.
is what you're saying is surprising, which reflects what?
Two things. One, frustration. This also shows the scale of anger people have against all institutions established in Ladakh.
What does this actually stand for in terms of land, resources, and identity?
So these domicile laws are quite interesting. They are unlike Kashmir.
Hello, this is In Focus, and I am Anupama Chandrasekhar. High in the Himalaya, more than 11,000 feet up, is Ladakh. It's a beautiful land of mountains, glaciers, deserts, and also it's home to Buddhist monasteries, herders. Of course, a lot of us travel to Ladakh as tourists, but it's also a very important region in terms of having China on the east and Pakistan on the west. So it's a very important border land. But for decades, Ladakh has been part of Jammu and Kashmir. And today, it's actually the center of movement where they're demanding statehood and also special status under India's constitution, which actually brings up questions about land, resources, and also, most importantly, identity. To understand what's unfolding, our guest is Peerzada Ashiq, a Hindu Srinagar-based journalist who has been reporting closely on the protests in Ladakh. Welcome, Peer, to In Focus.
Thank you for having me.
Peer, you've been closely following events in Ladakh. For people who may have only seen a few headlines, can you paint a picture of what these protests are looking like right now?
I would use the word unprecedented. I mean, this is something which Ladakh has not seen for decades. It's for the first time after 37 years that Ladakh has seen an agitation where people have died. The last time there were killings in protest was in 1987 when there was a movement started for Union Territory status of Ladakh. Then Ladakh was part of the Kashmir division of Jammu and Kashmir. So Jammu and Kashmir used to have two divisions, Jammu division and Kashmir division. So at that point of time, Ladakh was part of the Kashmir division, and there was this agitation which was Leh-based that the whole region should be given Union Territory status. Usually we look at Ladakh as a place which is for leisure, tourism. People are, because of Buddhism, most of them are peace-loving people. They are rooted to their culture and identity. And very nationalist. We saw Ladakhi's role when it comes to Kargil war in 1999. Also when Galwan happened in 2021. How they stood with soldiers, shoulder to shoulder. But today's images are completely different. We saw protesters coming out and burning down vehicles, attacking the BJP headquarters, which is quite interesting for me. And that protesters also chose Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council Secretariat and burn it down. And this is the only institution which still has some democratic values attached to Ladakh. So Ladakh, was created as a union territory in 2019 when Delhi decided, or the center decided, that the Article 370 should be done away with, which provided special status to entire region in terms of land, job, identity. There was a specific article like 35A which did not allow anyone from outside either to buy land or apply for jobs, which was true of Ladakh also. So within that autonomous structure, there was greater autonomy for Ladakh region in terms of Hill Council. This was besides the Article 370, besides 35A, Ladakh region had more independent powers in terms of hill councils. And there are two hill councils because Ladakh has two major towns of Kargil and Leh. And both will execute or plan things indigenously, locally allocate funds.
Right. So it's an organization. These are organizations which are basically supporting self-governance, right? And deciding on a lot of things related to land resources.
Absolutely. So Hill Council is basically an elected body. So each Hill Council has around 26 members they are elected, and the party which wins the majority gets to appoint chief, CEC, chief executive counselor.
Okay, and you're talking about this in context of the fact that the Ladakh Hill Council's office was also burnt, right? Which is
Yes.
what you're saying is surprising, which reflects what, Peer?
Two things. One, frustration. This also shows the scale of anger people have against all institutions established in Ladakh. If you look at the composition of it's quite interesting. On 23rd of September, when Sonam Wangchuk, climate activist, or the activist who sort of is mobilizing people to around demands of statehood and sixth schedule, was on hunger strike, and two of his associates were hospitalized. On that day, we just saw 500 people attending that dharna or strike. But
Right,
because
and
of the
and just to give context, you're talking about the fact that this was in the latest of a string of hunger strikes that the local people have been doing. And Sonam Wangchuk, of course, is the very popular and famous engineer based out of Ladakh who runs a school, who also does other engineering related stuff like the ice stupas, which a lot of people have looked at from overseas. And of course, he's won the Raman Magsaysay Award, right? So he has been somebody who's been spearheading this non-violent struggle of having maybe to walk to Delhi, perhaps, which they had done last year, and then of course having occasional hunger strikes, which which is kind of done in rotation, where people come in, then they take on the baton from somebody else. So this was in the latest of the series of hunger strikes. Yeah,
there was a context to why he went on hunger strike. Delhi earlier in this year, around January, said that we will hold rounds of talks with representatives from the Ladakh region. So the composition of the representatives from the Ladakh region is that there will be 3 representatives from Muslim majority Kargil, and there will be 3 representatives from Buddhist majority Leh, and the member of parliament will be heading that delegation. So we saw that in May this year, there was a round of talk between the representatives of Ladakh and high-powered committee, which is appointed by Ministry of Home Affairs. So immediately after that meeting, we saw that new domicile laws were notified for Ladakh. So these domicile laws are quite interesting. They are unlike Kashmir. In Kashmir's context, the domicile law says anyone who was living in Kashmir for the past 7 years is eligible for a domicile certificate. In Ladakh's case, they said anyone who will start living in Ladakh after 2035 for 7 years or 15 years will be eligible. Anyone who studies in Ladakh for 7 years, anyone who works in Ladakh for 15 years, they would be eligible for domicile certificates.
And just to kind of again give context over here, when you're talking about domicile law, you're basically talking about a legal definition of who's considered a permanent residence, right? And that becomes important, especially when you determine government jobs, land ownership, and other local benefits, right?
True. So 2 important things happened in June this year. One was domicile law, another was reservation for jobs. So they said 85% jobs will be reserved for ST, SC, OBC. And entire population of Ladakh actually is ST. So, besides economic weaker section, which is around 10%. So 95% of jobs are reserved in Ladakh now. But the only problem, which is very technical, which everybody needs to understand, the domicile laws which were introduced in Ladakh are through executive orders. They are not constitutional guarantees, which means center can amend them, withdraw them whenever they want to. So these are not constitutional guarantees that these laws are permanent for Ladakh. And there are fears among Ladakhis that what if these laws are changed in the future? I think then the promise which MHA had made after May talks was that we will hold another round of talks, and where we will specifically talk about statehood and sixth schedule, because inclusion of Ladakh in sixth schedule provides more extra provisions.
Right. And I do want to touch on this. So one, of course, when you mentioned MHA, you're talking about the Ministry of Home Affairs, right? That's what you're talking about. Since you mentioned the sixth schedule, could we go back a little bit and talk a little bit about, what it means, the demands for statehood, or when we talk about the sixth schedule, this may sound technical. So, what does this actually stand for in terms of land, resources, and identity, if you were to explain it to a layperson?
So, if Ladakh is included in the sixth schedule, so they get the powers to create autonomous zones. So, those autonomous zones will have powers to legislate. They have powers to have judiciary and executive powers. They have also powers vis-a-vis to customs or customary laws which are prevalent in Ladakh. So the biggest thing which sixth schedule for an ordinary reader or an ordinary citizen is that these laws empowers locals to legislate on local issues,
Correct.
which
To
is not
govern
possible
themselves independently of the central government, right?
independent of the central government, and they can legislate on issues like environment, on ecology, on land, transfer of land, on jobs, on languages.
And this
Uh,
is something that's already present in the states of the Northeast.
Yeah, there are several northeastern states where sixth schedule is in place, and people actually enjoy the status because it gives it is something closer to Article 370 in terms of special status. Because here it is a smaller autonomous region. In Article 370, it was the assembly which had extra powers. So here they divide areas into the zones with certain distinct identities and allow them to legislate on local issues. And as I said, they have all judiciary, executive, and legislature powers, which is not true as of now for Ladakh. And I think one point is very important for our viewers to understand. When Ladakh was created as a union territory in 2019, unlike Jammu and Kashmir, it is a union territory without a legislature. That means it doesn't have an assembly or upper house, lower house. So the only body where people get to elect people is council, hill councils, which we talked about earlier. And these hill councils have very little role in terms of legislation. They can't legislate on local issues. The hill council only has powers to when it comes to the budgetary allocation or policy making, which is Sadak Bijli Pani, nothing more than that.
Right. And again, I just want to clarify once more to our listeners, because this is such an important point that you're making over here, that Ladakh doesn't have, unlike Kashmir, it doesn't have its own legislative assembly, because basically it doesn't have an elected assembly, which means that local residents do not have powers to make decision about governance, land, and development. And you said, of course, there is the Hill Council, which is there, but that their role is largely limited to budgetary allocations and not really, all these other things related to governance. Yeah.
Just for perspective, when Ladakh was a part of Kashmir region, the region would send at least 4 legislators or MLAs to the assembly. And most of the time, one of the MLAs would become a minister, whichever party comes to power for representation. So we have seen in the past that people from Ladakh have been tourism ministers. They've been holding portfolios of importance, and suddenly now they don't have those portfolios to them. Also, in terms of parliament seats, Ladakh just has 1 parliament seats. And there has been a demand, which is part of the 4-point demands which they have made before the Ministry of Home Affairs, that the number of seats for the Ladakh should be increased from 1 to 2 Lok Sabha seats. So it's not just one that they demand statehood with the legislature for Ladakh or 6th schedule, but they also want that there should be a separate public service commission empowered to recruit locally. As of now, we don't have any public service commission which can recruit people. Most of the gazetted post recruitments are done, by the LG office, but not through any recruitment process.
Right, the
Also,
Lieutenant Governor's office.
yes. So there was also this demand that the number of seats in terms of Lok Sabha seats should be increased from 1 to 2 and divided between Leh and Kargil.
Yeah. And since you mentioned the 4-point demands, again, just to kind of clarify, we're talking about one of the demands being full statehood, like we've spoken about previously, the 6 scheduled protections, which you kind of explained. And now, of course, we're talking about local job reservation and, of course, fair political representation, right? Which will allow Leh and Kargil to their own Lok Sabha seat instead of sharing one, right? These were like the 4 points that they were hoping to
One
do.
point I want to add here is that
Sure.
even panchayat elections have not been held in Ladakh since it became a union territory. Unlike Kashmir, where there is a three-tier democracy, you have panchayat, you have municipal elections, you have assembly elections. Ladakh has just council elections. So they feel deprived in terms of expressing their anger, through democratic spaces. Vote is also an expression of anger or disliking or liking for something. So once you don't allow people to express themselves, which translates something comprehensive for the place, they feel deprived of democratic rights. So I think that also became a fuel for protesters to come up in large numbers recently, because we saw that most of the unemployed youth were part of the demonstrations. As I said, not less than 7,000, as per the police, figures, that more than 7,000 people attended that dharna suddenly in a day, and they turned violent. And most of them, even if you look, the 4 people who died, 3 were under 30. So that shows the most of the protesters who were participating in these street protests were from younger population, mostly unemployed, and frustrated with the fact that there is no policy when it comes to the employment. There is no policy when it comes to the people's right to express themselves. So there's a combination of factors which contributed to the kind of violence we saw, which is very rare for Ladakh on September 24th this year.
I was talking to a journalist from Ladakh, and she also clarified that, you know, when you look at the hunger strike, a lot of people who would come would be above the age of 50. And even the 2 people who have hospitalized, a man and a woman, they were pretty elderly, and for the most, a lot of people, including Sonam Wangchuk, who gave an interview, spoke of how they would keep lamenting about the fact that there were no young people who were joining these protests. And that particular day, the numbers you mentioned, it seems like a huge, huge number, right? Can you take us through what happened? The people on hunger strike, they collapsed. I mean, what have you learned from your reporting about those days? And why did it become such a turning point? I mean, you've obviously explained it really well about what was brewing, what was the anger brewing there, and how it escalated. And you, of course, have seen things, similar things happen in Kashmir, and you were just comparing the two things as to the two regions as well. Could you give me an idea about how you would see things that happened in Kashmir and compare it to what happened in Ladakh?
See, Kashmir has a different context when it comes to the violent protests. Most of the times, the trigger of violence was killing of a civilian and death of a militant commander who had some influence in the society, or the larger shutdown and mobilized by the separatists. In Ladakh's case, it's a civil society movement, which is very recent. In Kashmir's context, it has been going on for the past 30 years. There are different shades of opinion and different shades of political goals people espouse, or the political parties espouse, from greater autonomy to self-rule to independent Kashmir. But in Ladakh's context, it's very focused. It's about statehood, it's about more powers in terms of legislature, it's about sixth schedule, it's about identity. They don't want anything outside the Constitution of India. There are political parties in Kashmir which want certain things outside Indian Constitution. Those voices may not be dominant anymore in Kashmir post 2019 and the crackdown we saw after 2019 when Center decided to end a special status to JNK under Article 370. Coming back to the Ladakh protests, on 22nd of September, we heard speeches made by those who were attending the hunger strike, appealing youth to be part of the protests. And not many people were turning out because they were busy with the routine they would see.
I heard that there was some entrance exam also coming up for some jobs,
Yes,
government
they
jobs.
were preparing for those, and this is the tourist season. Every pocket of Leh is having tourists. They are hosting tourists at this point of time. Besides the Leh town, we have Pangong, so we have Nobra Valley, we have Han Lake. So all these places are buzzing with tourists because Himachal has been closed because of landslides, and people are now moving more towards Ladakh, where we did not see many landslides. So What happened when two protesters collapsed during the hunger strike? As you mentioned, they were both aged. And when they reached the hospital, the news floated was that their condition is very critical. And this went very viral online. And I think the mobilization started from the hospital itself, because we saw many people and mostly youth turning up at the hospital, on 22nd of September. And then the Band call was given by a youth, organization affiliated to Ladakh Buddhist Association. So suddenly there was this mobilization of youth. There was this frustration which reached to the tipping point that that those people who represent our aspirations, those people who are on hunger strike for our rights, are not getting the kind of response they expected from Delhi. So this thought process converted into a major swell of people coming to the hunger strike spot. 7,000 people came, listened to a few speeches, and despite the appeals made by the Ladakh Buddhist Association and Sonam Wangchuk that it should be peaceful protest, they came out and spread in different directions of Leh town, and two places specifically saw most violent protests. One was the BJP headquarters, and because they were frustrated with the policy of BJP. I must tell you that Ladakh has a umbrella organization. It's called Ladakh Apex Body. At one point of time, BJP was part of Leh Apex Body, demanding almost the same things what the other constituents of the Ladakh Apex Body would demand. But they have withdrawn from Leh Apex Body earlier this year. So there was anger against BJP brewing for the reasons that why did they withdrew from the Ladakh Apex Body. And I must tell you, in 2020, when we saw Hill Council elections for Leh, so one of the promises made in the manifesto was statehood, was sixth schedule, and it did not come from Congress or any other party. It came from the ruling BJP. So they were expecting that the BJP will deliver on these demands, and I think that was the reason why they chose BJP office, to express their anger. Another why they attacked Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council could probably because they are not happy with just having council. So this is also an assertion that council does not fulfill aspirations of people of Ladakh. They want more democratic structures in place besides Hill Council to legislate, to execute their orders, to frame policies for a region which is ecologically fragile, which has a very small population. Let me give you this, for our readers or our viewers. Ladakh has a land mass of around 60,000 square kilometers. So Kashmir Valley is merely 16,000 square kilometers. Ladakh would be 5 times or 3 times bigger than Delhi. I think 5 times bigger than Delhi. So that gives you an idea. But the population is only 3.5 lakh as per the 2011 census. So even if it will not be more than 4 or 4.5 lakh as of today. So this is a smaller population. There, the apprehensions that the demography can change is for real, because only 10,000 people settling in Ladakh can bring a change in their demographics. It's not that Ladakh requires huge numbers to change the demographics. I spoke to a few leaders. I spoke to a few activists who are part of the agitation. They draw parallels between Ladakh and Lahore and Spiti. We have saw over decades the population of Buddhists in both Lahore and Spiti has trickled down to negligible. It's almost negligible Buddhist population there. So the fears are real. They think if it can happen to Lahore and Spiti, which was a Buddhist majority area at one point of time, it will not take much time to change the demographics of Ladakh unless they have the right to legislate who can come and settle in Ladakh.
Right. No, fair enough. Now, we spoke of Sonam Wangchuk earlier, but before that, I also wanted to address this one bit. Of course, the protesters came, and then what followed was police action, right? Could you talk a little bit about that? One of the things I heard when Sonam spoke in his interview before his arrest was he was talking about just the level of force that was used, where even the shots fired were not at the feet, but they were at the head and neck and chest, which obviously meant, fatal shootings, right? So, could you talk a little bit about that in terms of how was the police action and was it necessary?
7,000 in Ladakh's context is a huge population, given the total size of the population. So they coming out. Now look at the figures, which are official figures, which has come from the Ladakh administration. So on 23rd or 24th, we saw 90 injuries, and most of them, around 80, were bullet injuries. Out of 90, we saw 4 young people dying, and 7 are critical. Out of 7, one was shifted to Delhi because he had his lung punctured by a bullet. If you look at those those who died in the protests, so one has his head had 2 bullet shots, so another had abdomen bullet shots. So it looked like that the bullets, when they could have used pellets also, which they have done in Kashmir's context, and which has proven to a better crowd management tool. Instead of pellets, they decided to use bullets in Ladakh. That is something which is very surprising. Why didn't they use pellets in first place? Pellets are a smaller, which is used, for hunting also. It can leave scars. It will not kill unless a person is hit by more than 20 or 30 pellets. So most of the people who are hit who were hit during protests had bullet injuries above their abdomen, which is very clear that there are chances. I think it requires an inquiry to establish if there was use of disproportionate force against protesters, because the lieutenant governor's office argues that one of the CRPF vehicle was burned down when personnel were inside the vehicle, so they had to shoot so that they survive the mob. Similarly, at BJP office, they argue that vehicle after vehicle was being burned down. They tried to barge, and it forced the security forces to open fire. So I think it's a very complex situation which requires an inquiry so that it is not repeated in the future. And how can we put in place a policy that if we have to contain a mob, the fatalities should be on the lower side? That is something I'm pretty sure they will look into. But as of now, as you look at the number of casualties, it's huge, unprecedented, and their bullets were fired above the waist, which is not what usually law, maintaining force would do. So I think it would require some kind of inquiry to establish the circumstances in which they were forced, or they fired, or if they fired disproportionately. These are the questions the administrations will have to answer in the coming days.
Yeah, Stanzin, the reporter from Ladakh who I was talking to, mentioned that the thing was even the protesters, the mob, was not afraid of the police, and she said they probably were not afraid of the police because they didn't think they'd be firing bullets, maybe water guns or pellets, and I think they were obviously sadly mistaken there. Now, Sonam Wangchuk has been detained under the National Security Act, right, which is a very tough law, usually used against very serious threats. Can you talk a little bit about Mr. Wangchuk? Why do people see him as such a powerful symbol, and why is the government so wary of him?
I think Sonam Wangchuk has a history. Besides being a climate activist and engineer, he got very popular, and he sort of started become part of popular imagination of Ladakh and outside also when the movie Three Idiots got released. Because it is believed that the Three Idiots was motivated or influenced by Wangchuk's character.
Right. So, Amir Khan's character, Phungsuk Wangdu, was supposed to be based on him.
And then when he did the first hunger strike, 2 years ago, we saw that he was able to mobilize people across the country from almost every state of India. Videos were posted in solidarity in favor of Sonam Wangchuk. And his contribution in terms of education, in terms of, as you mentioned, Ice Stupa, something which was unique for Ladakh, which addressed their water issues. So he was bringing solutions to problems which are real for Ladakh. How much green cover is required, what kind of housing should be adapted or opted for. So he was into a science which is applicable. which is something which was contributing to Ladakh's ecology as well as the way people should live in Ladakh. So, one, he has a youth appeal. Bollywood also contributed to it. And he proved his worth when he started doing the hunger strikes, and it saw mobilization across. I think even Sonam Wangchuk was surprised when he did the first hunger strike. I remember he said, I was not expecting that there will be huge videos posted online on social media from Arunachal, northeastern states in South India. I mean, there were protests in favor of Wangchuk in South India also. So over a period of time, he also became a unifying factor between Buddhist majority Leh and Muslim majority Kargil. I must tell you, when 2019 happened, when Ladakh was carved out as a separate union territory, the demands were polarized between Leh and Kargil. Kargil wanted a reintegration with Kashmir. Kargil wanted a restoration of Article 370. And Leh wanted union territory status. And then Wangchuk and others started having dialogue between the two regions, and they decided that 4-point agenda is something which is common to both the places. And Wangchuk became someone who could put pressure on policymakers in Delhi through mobilization. I don't think there's anyone in Ladakh who has popular appeal among young people as Sonam Wangchuk. So he was not only putting pressure, he was also trying that Delhi should deliver on their promises, which was not true of the political class of Ladakh. He was not entering into the electoral politics. He made it very clear that he will work from the fringes, but will put pressure on Delhi so that they fulfill the demands. So
yeah, but he was also supportive of the 2019 move as well, right? Where he was praising the BJP and things, and I guess a lot of people in Ladakh.
There is a reason to it, because he has been consistently saying that Ladakh requires a union territory status before 2019. And he was probably happy by the fact that Article 370 was done away, and he praised BJP for granting Ladakh a union territory status, without knowing that that could become the beginning of his struggle for the larger goals for Ladakh. Which we see, the fact that he has been shifted to Jodhpur. I remember in '99, it was the separatist leaders, Mirwais, Gilani, and Professor Bhatt, who were shifted to Jodhpur after '99 parliamentary elections because of the boycott call given by them. So he became the first Ladakhi to be shifted to a jail where most Kashmiri separatists would be put up in the past.
And so you're saying that after his arrest, he has been shifted to the Jodhpur, right? That's what the news stories are talking about. And you before we started this,
by the officials also.
Okay. And before we started this conversation, you did mention a little bit more about this move. Could you talk a little bit about this, about forgetting and people's memories, right?
I think Delhi has created a sort of a model in Kashmir. 2019 was not only about special status. They also dislodged the entire leadership from Kashmir by putting them in the jails. They did not allow trader bodies, associations, elections. They did not allow bar association elections. So they did not allow any leadership to independently grow in Kashmir region. And the fact remains that most of the separatist leaders who were picked up in 2018-19, either the run-up or after 2019, people have forgotten about them. My worry is same could be the case with Ladakh, that if Sonam Wangchuk is put up in Jodhpur for a longer period of time, I have my worries that Ladakh may not sustain its protest. The reason is because it's a tourism economy. Many people have taken huge loans to construct hotels. You need to see Ladakh as Goa of North. It has its own cycles of tourists, and even in autumn and winters, people have started now traveling to Ladakh. So people would not like to give up their livelihood and their routine, for a long period of time. But unlike Kashmir, Ladakh is a very cohesive society. The fact that DGP has to himself go, not a police officer from Ladakh, also shows that nobody wanted to become the face of the arrest, who is a local. So it's a very cohesive society. I think there are challenges for center to tackle in the coming days and coming months. I don't think that like Kashmir, uh, Sonam Wangchuk could be easily forgotten because of the struggle. As I said, he was on the margins. He was working as a civil society activist rather than politician who has ambitions to become MP or a legislator. So he has that youth sort of pulse and sport, for the reason that he's sacrificing, or he's putting it, holding these protests for the future of Ladakh. So it will be quite interesting. Will people forget about him if he's off the scene, or it will galvanize more? We will see more galvanization or mobilization of people on the streets, or some kind of peaceful protests to ensure that he is released as soon as possible.
My last question, Peer, is related to the development plans that are there in Ladakh, right? There's this massive solar energy project that's planned in this pastoral area of Changthang, where a lot of herders take their Pashmina goats, which is very famous for its expensive wool. Now, what worries have you heard from these people related to this, and having a say in such developmental projects, which obviously is something that crops up in many areas with indigenous people, right? We see that in central India. We see it in different parts of India, where you see a huge conglomerate come in and, probably take over lands and develop things and probably cause pollution. So can you talk a little bit about the developmental projects and how people are having issues with this?
I visited Changthang earlier this year, so I met a few herders also in Changthang Valley. It's a plateau, it's a flat piece of land at more than the altitude of 11,000 up to 16,000 feet. So the herders, they are traditional. They are using these pastures for centuries now. The problem with Pashmina goat is that you cannot have pure Pashmina if goat is not being tended or attended to above the altitude of 9,000 to 10,000 feet. So if you set up solar plants which will disturb or displace the herders to the lower altitudes, we may not get Pashmina wool at all. And the reason why we don't have Pashmina goats in Kashmir Valley is because we don't have high altitudes. We have altitudes around 9,000 or 10,000 feet, but we don't have plateaus and pastures at that altitude. That's why Ladakh had those altitudes and they survived Pashmina for centuries now. And that worry is there and people talk about it. That's why one of the projects was publicly opposed by people of Leh when they were talking about the biggest solar power. And Sonam Wangchuk also educated people why it is very dangerous. It's not only about solar plants. We saw recently earlier this year there was this that outside investors want to invest in hotel business in Leh, so that we have better facility hotels, and it was opposed. And there is a movement. They said whoever will sell land to outsider will be boycotted locally. So there's already mobilization on these issues, which Delhi sees as development and locals sees tampering with the ecology, tampering with the demographics, and they think their future is at stake if they allow unplanned change in demographics, unplanned development, bringing to the region, which is very fragile. As you rightly said, there's one country sitting on the east, another on the west. Siachen has been a battleground since 80s. We saw Galwan happening very recently. So this is a region where Delhi has to be very sensitive. They have to look at demands through long-term strategic goals. They cannot look at the demands of Ladakhis through narrow nationalistic goals or the political party's goal. I think the time has come to engage Ladakh in a more positive manner and see if genuine issues can be addressed through democratic structures, and how much development and how can we actually help real development, which is not necessarily displacing the herders by bringing more roads, electricity to the villages, education, health. There are many subjects which we don't talk about when it comes to Ladakh. Poverty, if you move just away from Kargil, you will see there are villages which are very poor. I mean, even in Leh, if you travel north or south, you will see there are villages quite poor, without electricity, without no modern tool or technique to do farming. So there's a lot of areas or spheres where Delhi has to look into and use the term development rather than taking land for bigger projects or for bigger companies. I would say, we cannot look at Ladakh through narrow prism.
I don't think I can have a better ending to this conversation. I would really like to thank you for explaining everything so lucidly and so patiently and offering us a comparison. And of course, I don't think we could have had a better conversation with someone, because you have also traveled to Ladakh, you've seen things, and of course, you live in Kashmir, so you have a sense of the pre and the post 2019 related to Ladakh. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you
Thank you.
talking to us.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.